The purpose of today's video is to give you an overview of the APIs used with Palo Alto networks. We'll be starting with just a few of the basics of using the XML API. Let's head over to the firewall and build our first request. You can type /API at the end of the IP address to get to the XML request builder. We'll be working with the firewall interface configuration, which you can find under the configuration commands. As you drill down further into each of the elements, you'll see that under the XML API URL heading, the command is being built for you, so you can try it out in the browser. Clicking the URL at the bottom of the page will give you a sample response. Targeting Ethernet 1.1, and as you can see, there's no currently associated IP address. We're going to confirm this is the case using curl in an Ubuntu shell. A few things to note are that some of the special characters in the URL are URL encoded, and for authentication I'm using a basic auth token included in the header. The response shows what we saw earlier in the UI. To make the response a bit easier to see, I'm using an open source tool called Postman we can use to send our requests. The authorization tab has basic auth set, and we see we get the same response as we did in the Ubuntu shell when we hit send. To update that value, we're going to be a little more specific and target layer 3. And in layer 3, target the IP address. We add an entry parameter with the value as 5.5.5.5 and send it to see we get a command succeeded response. Now using the first command, we'll send another request, but this time we see the value of the IP address now has 5.5.5.5. We're going to replicate what we did in the XML API in the REST API to get a sense of the difference between the two. To get to the documentation, you can type /REST-API-doc in the browser. We'll see a list of resources we can interact with on the left-hand side, but you can also type some keywords to find what you need. In this case, we're going to be targeting Ethernet 1.1 again, so we'll begin by typing that to get to the endpoint. We're going to copy that endpoint and do a GET request using the same basic auth header we used in the XML API. We'll get a successful response where we see the value of the IP address this time is 2.2.2.2. To update that value, we'll send a PUT request using the JSON body we can format using the same structure as the GET request, or we can find that structure in the documentation. Doing a GET request, we can see that the value is updated. Visit the Palo Alto Network's documentation page for more complicated use cases and more in-depth information.